Welcome to the High Tech Freedom Podcast. This is a podcast where we bring successful tech sales professionals, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs to share best practices, insights, and lessons learned with other tech sales professionals. As a sales professional, the more we learn, the more we earn. Once we earn it, how can we put those hard-earned commission dollars back to work to build additional income streams that will create the freedom we are all working to achieve? I'm your host, Chris Freeman. I'm a high-tech sales leader, real estate investor, and lifetime learner. Welcome back to the High Tech Freedom Podcast. So excited to have you here. Hope you're having a great Friday. If you're listening to this on a Friday, that's when I do release it. Today's topic is, are you stuck in a rut? Now, have you ever been or currently stuck in a sales rut? Right? That's where, do you feel like you're going through the motions? Maybe you're coming up a little short of plan, coming up a little short of forecast. The energy just doesn't seem to be there. I recently had a conversation with a rep that I know from a previous job, and he was dealing with what he felt like was being in a rut. And he was asking, how do you get unstuck, or how do you get out of that rut? And I thought, it's a really good question. Sales is a tough profession. That's part of the reason why you get paid well. But if you think about it, right, you're out there, you're hustling every day, you're working every day, you're going to face a large percentage of your time dealing with rejection and disappointment. I mean, that's just the reality. That's a big part of your day. For example, I recently just finished watching a Netflix documentary series on professional golf called Full Swing. They follow a number of highly competitive PGA golfers during a full season. So I think this would have been the 2021 season. Some of these people are on the top of their game, number one, number two in the world. Some are just trying to hang on to their PGA card. And as I watched this, I could really see the correlation to sales, because these players are losing most of the time. Imagine you practice every day, you play tournaments every couple weekends. To constantly lose? Sure, they still get paid when they make the cut after the second day, but you never hear them talk about getting paid after making the cut. They're there to win, and they're competitive, and that's what is top of mind for them. So it's no different than what you do in sales. You make a bunch of calls, most of those calls being ignored or rejected, right? Think about all your prospecting calls. You go out and have a number of sales calls, a number of sales meetings each week, with only a handful converting to pipeline. You have your rolling pipeline, and only a fraction of that is converting to revenue. And then there's a challenge of, hey, you've already sold it. Now you get to keep sold what you sold, right? Dealing with those issues and doing everything you can do to keep the customer happy. It's a lot of challenge. So it's not surprising that at times you could get stuck in a sales rut. So if you're in one, how do you get out of it? Or ultimately, how do you avoid getting into a sales rut? So when I think about a sales rut, there's two kinds. There are those situational, short-term kind of ruts or times where you get sucked into a challenge and that challenge is starting to pull you into that muddy rut of unproductive thinking. Then there's the more long-term rut that you got to watch out for this one, because that one has the risk of becoming a habit. And that is, that's when the rut gets so deep that you don't even know you're in it anymore. So let's touch on the short-term rut for a minute. Maybe you're in a situation where you've had a bad call, right? You've had a bad meeting, maybe a bad engagement with your manager. You're mad, you're pissed, you're frustrated. This one bad situation can carry on through your day or your week if you let it. It can totally derail all the great plans you had for the week. You wake up Monday, great plans, have everything mapped out, and then something derails the whole process. And next thing you know, you lost a whole week of really productive sales time. Now, I know it's obvious, but you need to take control of whatever that situation is. Now, you can't control the actual situation, but what do I mean by that? You can control how the situation is impacting you, right? So step one, and this is what I like to do, is remove yourself or disconnect the emotion from that situation. Again, easier said than done. We're emotional creatures, but if you don't, right, that short-term rut can carry into your long-term thinking. So one of my favorite hacks is to physically change my environment when I'm in a situation like that. I've got to change the environment and change my mindset. So if I'm at home, which a lot of us are nowadays, I'll get up, take the dog for a quick walk, maybe make a cup of coffee, cup of tea, just change the environment. It really forces my mind to shift its thinking. I talked about emotion. Sales can be an emotional roller coaster. In fact, it's also good not to get too high and get sucked into that one great thing that's going really well. If you're doing your sales process right, the highs and the lows is just part of a longer process to run a sales campaign, to run an account campaign or some territory campaign. So I know the topic today is more about a rut, but I also think there's some value in not getting too high when things are great. Now, I'm not the type that likes to go in and quote a bunch of scientific studies, but there are plenty of studies out there to demonstrate the power of how changing your physical situation can change your mental situation. Physically changing your environment that you're in, that'll change how you feel, right? It'll change your perspective. Sometimes just getting away, getting out of that environment will give yourself some different perspective by being removed from the physical area where you were experiencing maybe the challenge. I want to break in with this quick commercial from me. I am very excited to announce that we have our first multifamily real estate deal for the year. This is a really nice boutique 88 unit complex in Tempe, Arizona, which is an incredibly strong submarket of the Phoenix area. And we are partnered with my friend Reed and his company at the RSN Group. They're the ones that found the deal. And they also have another asset very close by this particular property. Investment spots on this one, they're going to fill up quickly because it is also structured to accept 1031 exchanges. And there's a number of exchanges out there right now looking for a home. So if you're interested, just contact us through hightechfreedom.com, or you could book a call using the link in the show notes. And even if you just want to learn a little bit more about the investing process, let's chat. I'm happy to share and follow up with some educational resources. Now back to the show. Now let's talk about a more long-term rut. If you're in a long-term rut, take the same approach, right? Get your mind out of the present and figure out a way to kind of reset to the future, right? Start looking and evaluating where you want to go, what you want to do, maybe a few adjustments with how you operate and how that could play out over time. So just as another example, I was just having this conversation with my daughter. So she's a competitive swimmer and she was really feeling like she was stuck in a rut with her swimming, just felt like she was going through the motions. Everything was just a drag with the whole process. And you could tell she was going through a whole set of emotions that was ultimately starting to impact her attitude. She was getting more negative about the whole process. And honestly, this topic of getting stuck in a rut kind of came from my experience of working and talking to her. To her credit, she was about 4 weeks out before some state championship meet, and she decided to take a week off. When I asked her why, she felt that it would be good for her to get some perspective, rest a little, maybe come up with a training plan for the 3 weeks before the event. And then after that week, just hit it hard with a higher level of energy. And funny enough, it worked. Her mental state was great. Her attitude was totally different after the break. And it really had an impact on her physical output. She came back and she was faster. So, when I felt like I was maybe in a rut, maybe stagnant, I mentioned I like stepping away, or I mentioned stepping away from your physical environment. When I'm in a long-term rut, I like stepping away for like a half a day. I sometimes will go to my large health club. There's a library there. I'll grab a coffee, maybe get a beer. I love pulling out a sheet of paper and then just writing down some of the future plans. So maybe it's specific to my business, to my role, whatever. But figuring out where I want to be in the next 6 months, some of the challenges that I'm having, and some ideas to address them. And I find this exercise of some long-term thinking to be energizing. It kind of re-energizes me. It takes me out of the rear view mirror focus and gets me looking down the road further ahead. In fact, this just happened to me. This wasn't necessarily a long-term rut, but I felt like things weren't going my way. So I stepped away, had dinner with some friends, had a really nice night, found ourselves at some neighborhood bar playing and competing against each other in pinball. And I'm not a very good pinball player, so I wasn't coming out on top in that game. But then the next day, so we kind of stepped away from the challenge. Then the next day, sat down with my piece of paper and just started going through some ideas. In fact, I also watched a recent webinar on some solution and just was really trying to get my mind refocused and just trying to generate some of the thought process and creative thinking that would maybe help reset some of maybe the attitude or challenges I was facing. So, by the way, we're talking about sales, but this process can apply to any area in your life. All right. So another hack or another tip, maybe to get out of a long-term rut. The other tip that I like to focus on is education. I'm sure at some point, if you've been working long enough, you have taken a training class, right? And I'm not talking about a product training class. I'm talking about a sales training or some training around your craft, whatever it is that you do. If you've taken those, have you ever walked away from it like with a new idea? You're energized, you're ready to approach your process a little bit differently, you're excited. Look, if you're striving to be a high performer, I'm almost 100% guaranteed that the answer to that is yes. So where do you get that, right? Maybe your company doesn't have a training coming up. Well, look, you can go in this world, there's plenty of content out there. It could be a podcast, it could be this podcast, it could be some online course, or maybe you do sign up for formal training. I found that this forces me to remove myself from the current situation and take a step back. And when I do that, I always walk away more energized. My mind starts generating ideas that relate to the business. Again, it gets me focused on the future. Another maybe hack or idea is your network can help. It can also hurt you. But when I think about like your network and your peers, maybe it's people that you work with, if you do find yourself starting to talk with more people that are in the same rut and those conversations are starting to shift to maybe more complaining, that's a red flag. Don't do that. But instead, look at your network, hunt down other top performers, grab some time with them, jump on a Zoom call. If you're in the office or in the same town, go buy them coffee and then just brainstorm ideas with them. It'll totally shift how you think about your challenges. And again, get you focused on the forward view, down the road, looking at the future. All right. So as I wrap up, it ultimately starts with and acknowledging that you are in a rut or starting to slide into a rut. And then once you acknowledge it, you can start working on, what do you do about it? So, all right, please listen to this last point. Have you been in a rut and then successfully come out of it and then crushed it in your role? If so, I really want to hear your story. I would love to have you come on the podcast, share some real world experiences. It's easy for me to share my thoughts, but your peers want to hear your story. So connect up with me on LinkedIn, send me a direct message, and we'll schedule a time to chat about a guest appearance. So thanks for all of your positive feedback on the podcast. I love hearing from you. If you like what you hear, please share the podcast with a friend. It would mean a ton to me. Again, until next week, make this your best week ever.
Thanks again for joining us today. To get more sales and real estate tips, you can subscribe to our newsletter at hightechfreedom.com. You can also join our private Facebook and LinkedIn group that is exclusively for sales professionals. If you found a nugget of good information in the podcast, please subscribe, give us a positive rating, and write a review. If there is a topic that you would like us to cover in the future, please send us a note through our website at hightechfreedom.com. Until next week, make this your best week ever.